When happiness becomes tyranny, pluribus and the seductive danger of collective conformity. Note, this essay contains spoilers for Pluribus Season 1. Vince Gilligan's Pluribus arrives at a moment when American democracy teeters between fragmentation and fascism, offering viewers a chilling parable about what happens when the many become one. The Apple TV Plus series, which premiered in November 2025 to critical acclaim, uses science fiction's oldest trick, the alien invasion, to examine our most urgent contemporary crisis, the erosion of individual thought in the face of authoritarian conformity. But unlike the body snatchers of earlier generations, Gilligan's invaders don't need to drag anyone screaming into conversion. They simply offer something more seductive than freedom, the promise that giving up your autonomy will finally make you happy. The show's title deliberately invokes E pluribus unum, out of many, one, the unofficial motto of the United States. But where that phrase once celebrated unity forged from diversity, pluribus exposes the authoritarian nightmare lurking within any demand for absolute uniformity. When an alien virus transforms nearly all of humanity into a peaceful hive mind called the others or the joined, only 13 people remain immune, including protagonist Carol Sturka, Reese Sehorn, a miserable romance novelist living in Albuquerque. What follows is not an action-packed resistance thriller, but something far more unsettling, a meditation on why so many people, faced with the complete obliteration of their individual consciousness, would simply smile and surrender. The mythology of unity. From a progressive perspective, Pluribus functions as a masterclass in deconstructing the rhetoric of unity that authoritarian movements always deploy. The hive mind in Gilligan's vision has achieved everything our politicians claim to want: no war, no poverty, no racism, no conflict. The infected are unfailingly polite, endlessly accommodating, and perpetually content. They have eliminated human suffering by eliminating human difference. It is paradise if you don't mind that paradise requires the death of your soul. This is where the show's mythological underpinnings become essential to understanding its political critique. Gilligan and his writers deliberately frame Carol's journey through the lens of Greek epic poetry. Carol herself becomes a kind of Penelope figure, waiting at home in New Mexico while the world transforms around her, trying to maintain her sense of self in a reality that no longer makes sense. Meanwhile, Manauso's Ovido, Carlos Manuel Vesca, a Portuguese speaker from Paraguay, embarks on an Odyssean journey from South America to New Mexico, teaching himself English along the way, determined to find the one other person who still believes humanity is worth fighting for. Episode 7, titled The Gap, showcases this mythic parallel with stunning visual storytelling. For nearly an hour, we watch Carol and Manauso's in parallel narratives with almost no dialogue. Just two people, thousands of miles apart, each grappling with isolation in radically different ways. Carol, increasingly depressed in her Albuquerque cul-de-sac, indulges in hedonistic gestures: fireworks, golf from downtown rooftops, elaborate meals she eats alone. At one point, a firework launcher tips over and points directly at her face. She doesn't move. She just stands there, waiting to see if it will kill her. It misses, but the message is clear. Carol is playing Russian roulette with her own existence because loneliness has made living feel pointless. Manauso's, meanwhile, treks through the Darien Gap, that notorious stretch of jungle between Colombia and Panama, where thousands of real-world migrants risk death seeking better lives. He refuses all help from the hive mind, sleeping in churches, catching fish, leaving money for gas he siphons from abandoned cars. When the others warn him the jungle will kill him, he goes anyway. And when the jungle's chunga plant impales him on bacteria-covered spikes, the others rescue him against his will. Both Carol and Manausos end the episode in the same devastating position, forced to acknowledge they cannot survive alone, even when survival means accepting help from the very force trying to erase them. This is the show's first major insight about authoritarianism. It wins not by forcing compliance, but by making resistance unsustainable. The hive doesn't need to threaten Carol. They just need to wait until her isolation becomes unbearable. They just need to make her so lonely that when Zosia, Carolina Widra, her assigned liaison to the collective, finally returns, Carol collapses sobbing into her arms, writing "Come back" in giant white letters on her driveway like a desperate prayer. The baptism of conformity. The show's use of religious imagery cuts even deeper. In one of the season's most disturbing sequences, we watch Cusimeu, a young girl in a remote Peruvian village, voluntarily join the hive mind. The scene is staged to look exactly like a Christian baptism. The girl laid back, held gently, breathing in the conversion vapor like a sacrament. She receives the Holy Spirit of the collective consciousness, and when she rises, she's smiling. But her goat, left behind, still shows genuine emotion. The girl does not. She walks away from everything she knew, happy but hollow, saved but lost. This isn't accidental imagery. Gilligan is drawing a direct parallel between religious conversion and political radicalization. The hive mind operates exactly like a cult. It promises belonging, meaning, and an end to suffering. It offers answers to every question. It eliminates doubt by eliminating the capacity for independent thought. Everyone thinks alike, talks alike, dresses alike, smiles alike. Individuality isn't suppressed. It's absorbed into something larger that claims to give life meaning. For progressive viewers, this resonates with uncomfortable contemporary parallels. We've watched people we know, family members, old friends, neighbors, undergo what feels like a similar conversion. They discover a political movement or ideology that promises simple answers to complex problems. They join online communities that reinforce a single worldview. They begin speaking in the same phrases, sharing the same memes, expressing the same righteous certainty. And when you try to reach them, you encounter not a person but a spokesperson for the collective. The individual you knew is still there, technically, but accessing them feels impossible. The show refuses to let us off the hook by making the hive mind obviously evil. The others never lie to Carol, they simply withhold truth. They manipulate her by giving her everything she asks for, while keeping her ignorant of their real capabilities. When she sarcastically asks if they'd give her a hand grenade, they deliver one. She tosses it, testing them, and it explodes, injuring Zoja. Later, Carol asks if they'd really give her an atomic bomb. They don't answer directly. But in the season finale, after Carol discovers the hive has found a way to forcibly convert her using stem cells from her frozen eggs, she asks for that bomb. A helicopter lands in her cul-de-sac, carrying a massive wooden crate. "What's in the box?" Manausos asks. "Atom bomb," Carol replies. The seduction of submission. What makes Pluribus so politically potent is its refusal to offer false hope. Carol doesn't heroically resist the hive from beginning to end. She wavers. She's tempted. She falls in love with Zoja, or convinces herself she has, seeking human connection even when that human is merely a beautiful avatar of an alien intelligence. The show forces us to watch Carol choose the girl over the world. The episode title of the finale literally translates to "the girl or the world," embarking on a globe-trotting romance with her captor. For weeks, Carol explores what it might mean to simply accept this new reality. She learns the others sleep together in convention centers and sports arenas to conserve resources. She discovers they communicate through electromagnetic fields. She even finds out they eat people, consuming the bodies of the dead for sustenance, but she keeps trying to see them as something other than monstrous. When Manausos finally reaches New Mexico and tries to cure one of the joined using radio frequency 8.6130, which he's discovered may disrupt the hive's collective consciousness, Carol actually threatens him with a shotgun. This is where the show becomes devastatingly honest about human nature. Sometimes the hardest thing to accept isn't oppression, but liberation. Carol has adapted to her cage. The hive has given her comfort, companionship, even romance. Yes, it's fake, a calculated manipulation designed to soften her resistance, but it feels real enough. And feeling something, even something false, beats feeling nothing at all. Progressives understand this dynamic because we've watched it play out politically for generations. Authoritarian movements don't succeed by promising freedom, they succeed by promising order. They offer certainty in uncertain times. They provide clear enemies to blame for complex problems. They create belonging for people who feel isolated. And crucially, they don't present themselves as tyranny, but as the solution to tyranny, the force that will finally make everything right if everyone would just stop resisting and get on board. The hive mind in Pluribus tells Carol they're operating according to a biological imperative. They claim to be making humanity better, perfecting it, eliminating the flaws that cause suffering. This is the language every totalitarian movement uses. We're not destroying you, we're completing you. We're not taking away your freedom, we're freeing you from the burden of choice. We're not erasing your identity, we're giving you something better, membership in something greater than yourself. The color of control. Gilligan uses visual language as precisely as dialogue. The show's color symbolism operates on multiple levels, creating a visual vocabulary that tracks Carol's psychological journey. Purple represents Carol's inner world, her creativity, her past, her private identity. It appears in the purple pillow a fan brings to her book signing, in the purple Sharpie she uses to sign books, in the purple sand of her fantasy novel series. Even the bandages she wears after an early injury are purple, marking wounds connected to her core self. Yellow dominates the visual landscape of the post-joining world, but it's a deeply ambiguous color. Carol's bright yellow leather jacket is her armor, her visible declaration of individuality. The show's marketing uses yellow to suggest sunshine and happiness. But yellow is also the color of disease, jaundice, liver failure, fever. It's a warning color. The hive mind co-ops yellow, giving Carol yellow gloves in a twisted gesture of care, trying to make her see their forced cheerfulness as genuine joy. And then there's blue, the definitive sign of infection. Every member of the hive has a subtle blue shimmer in their eyes, a visual confirmation that the person you're looking at no longer truly exists as an individual. As Carol spends more time with the hive, her environment shifts. Her clothing incorporates more blue. Her house accumulates blue objects. The visual transformation tracks her psychological surrender, showing us what she can't yet admit to herself. She's being assimilated by degrees, her resistance eroding one small compromise at a time. This is how authoritarianism actually works. It doesn't announce itself with jackboots and midnight arrests. It seeps in gradually, shifting the visual and linguistic landscape until resistance feels not just difficult but absurd. You wake up one day and realize the world has changed, but you can't identify the exact moment it happened because there wasn't one moment. There were 10,000 small moments, each seeming insignificant, each moving you one step closer to accepting the unacceptable. The impossible arithmetic of resistance. By the finale, when Carol teams up with Manausos and acquires that atomic bomb, the show has made its most brutal point. Even the most dramatic act of resistance changes almost nothing. Carol's nuclear weapon could kill millions. The hive acknowledges they don't want her to use it. But as creator Vince Gilligan explained in interviews, one atomic bomb wouldn't end their world. There are 7 billion of them populating the entire Earth. They can't afford to lose a few million bodies because their consciousness remains unified. Carol could detonate a nuclear weapon and barely dent the collective. This is the mathematics of authoritarianism that progressives must confront. When a movement captures enough people, individual acts of resistance become tragically insufficient. You can be right, courageous, and completely ineffective all at once. The hive doesn't fear Carol's bomb because they've already won the numbers game. They have the patience of the collective and the luxury of near omniscience. They can make Carol happy, comfortable, even loved. All she has to do is stop fighting. The show deliberately leaves us uncertain whether resistance is even the right choice. Manausos represents the uncompromising position. The infected aren't human anymore, they've lost their souls, and death would be preferable to this mockery of existence. Carol's position is more ambiguous. Maybe the infected are still human, just changed. Maybe humanity can be restored. Maybe the goal isn't destruction but healing. This philosophical divide mirrors real political debates. When institutions become corrupted, when movements turn authoritarian, when the machinery of democracy itself seems captured by anti-democratic forces, what's the appropriate response? Burn it down and start over. Reform from within. Accept that change is permanent and focus on minimizing harm. The show refuses to answer these questions, leaving Carol and Manausos standing beside a nuclear bomb with no clear plan beyond mutual acknowledgement that surrender is no longer an option. The loneliness economy. What makes Pluribus especially resonant in 2025 is how it engages with what sociologists have termed the loneliness epidemic, the documented rise in social isolation that predates but was dramatically accelerated by the COVID-19 pandemic. The show understands that authoritarianism thrives on disconnection. When people are atomized, desperate for community, starving for meaning, they become vulnerable to any movement that offers belonging. Carol's journey illustrates this perfectly. She's not a natural hero. She's bitter, alienated, contemptuous of her own fans, unable to connect even with the few other immune humans who might be her allies. She's the most miserable person on Earth. The show's tagline, not because of external circumstances, but because of her inability to find meaning in human relationships. When everyone else joins the hive and achieves instant connection, Carol is left with the devastating realization that she's been essentially alone her entire life. This is where the show becomes uncomfortably personal for many viewers. Carol's isolation, her inability to maintain friendships, her tendency to push people away. These aren't just character flaws, but reflections of how late capitalism has restructured human relationships. We're encouraged to see ourselves as individual entrepreneurs of our own lives, optimizing for personal success rather than collective flourishing. We're taught that needing other people is weakness. And then we're shocked when movements promising community and purpose prove irresistible to people who have been isolated by a system designed to keep them that way. The hive mind is horrifying, yes, but it also represents something genuinely appealing: an end to loneliness, an end to the exhausting work of maintaining relationships, an end to the anxiety of never knowing if you're truly understood. The collective knows you completely because the collective is you. There's no gap between self and other, no possibility of rejection or abandonment. It's fusion at the cost of selfhood, and for people sufficiently desperate, that trade starts to look reasonable. The future we're building. In the end, Pluribus functions less as a warning about some distant dystopian future, and more as a mirror held up to our present moment. The show asks uncomfortable questions about how we got here. Why so many people seem willing to surrender critical thinking for ideological certainty, and whether the liberal values of pluralism and individual rights can survive contact with movements that explicitly reject those values. The atomic bomb Carol has acquired, literally and metaphorically, represents the liberal dilemma. She has the capacity for massive destruction, but destruction alone won't solve the problem. The hive will survive her worst attacks. Meanwhile, her alliance with Manausos is fragile, based more on shared opposition than shared vision. He wants to destroy the infected and save humanity by killing the bodies that house the hive. She wants to restore the infected to individuality and save humanity by preserving those bodies. They're fighting the same enemy with fundamentally incompatible goals. This is where progressives find ourselves politically, armed with the capacity to resist but uncertain whether resistance will accomplish anything beyond satisfying our own sense of righteousness. We watch millions of our fellow citizens embrace authoritarian movements, and we can't decide if they're victims who need saving or willing participants who have made their choice. We can't agree on whether the system can be reformed or needs to be dismantled. We can't even agree on whether they're infected. Those who have joined the collective, however you define it, are still reachable or permanently lost. Pluribus offers no easy answers because there are no easy answers. The show's most radical act is its refusal to provide hope without evidence, solutions without acknowledgement of their costs, or comfort in the face of genuinely terrifying circumstances. Carol and Manausos stand together at season's end, united in their opposition to the hive, but far from certain they can defeat it, armed with a weapon that might destroy millions without changing anything fundamental about their situation. That's where we are. That's what Gilligan is showing us. The hive mind promises happiness, unity, peace, and purpose. All you have to do is give up what makes you you. All you have to do is stop asking questions, stop fighting, stop insisting on your right to be difficult, complicated, and free. All you have to do is join. And the terrifying thing, the thing that makes Pluribus genuinely prophetic rather than merely entertaining, is how many people, faced with that choice, are saying yes. Not because they're stupid or weak, but because the alternative, remaining isolated, alienated, struggling alone against forces too vast to comprehend, has become genuinely unbearable. The show doesn't judge Carol for nearly succumbing. It understands the seduction. It acknowledges the pain of resistance. It admits that sometimes the people fighting for freedom are just as flawed, just as compromised, just as uncertain as everyone else. But it also insists, quietly but firmly, that the fight matters anyway. That individuality, with all its suffering and difficulty, beats collectivism with all its false peace. That being human, messy, contradictory, free, is worth the cost, even when the cost seems impossibly high. That's the message progressives need to hear and need to spread. Not that victory is certain, it isn't. Not that resistance will be rewarded, it might not be. But that the choice between freedom and conformity, between individuality and absorption, between standing alone and kneeling together, is still a choice worth making. Even when you're outnumbered 7 billion to 13. Even when the enemy offers everything you've ever wanted. Even when resistance seems futile and surrender seems sensible, and the only weapons you have might destroy millions without saving anyone. Pluribus doesn't promise Carol will win. It doesn't promise Manaus's radio frequencies will work, or that the atomic bomb will change anything, or that humanity can be restored. It only promises that the battle matters, that consciousness matters, that the difference between a person and a puppet matters, even if the rest of the world has decided otherwise. In an era when democratic institutions crumble, when authoritarian movements surge, when collective amnesia replaces collective memory, when millions choose comfortable lies over uncomfortable truths, that promise, small as it is, might be the only promise worth keeping. The hive wants you to join. It wants you to stop fighting. It wants you to accept that resistance is pointless, that the future is inevitable, that you might as well be happy. Pluribus suggests you tell them to go fuck themselves, and then figure out how to live with being the last free person in a world that's chosen slavery. Because some things, the show insists, are worth fighting for even when the fight cannot be won. Individual consciousness is one of them. The right to be yourself, even when yourself is difficult and damaged and deeply flawed, is another. Carol stands beside her atomic bomb, aligned with a man she barely knows, facing an enemy that outnumbers her billions to one, and says, "We saved the world." She might be delusional. She's probably doomed. But she's still free. And that, in the end, is what Pluribus argues matters most.